Good morning, everybody. Thank you firstly for coming along today, and thank you to ICTR for asking me to join you and share some thoughts on where I see us at the moment in terms of the charity sector, and how I see that we as organisations need to embrace the new reality that we face. I suppose firstly, to start the conversation, I know some people in the room, but many of the rest of you I've never met before. So I think it's only fair to give you some thoughts about who I am, or some background and why I am where I am and doing what I do. My background is a civil servant. I spent most of my working career in the Department of Education, and during my time there I began to develop an interest in the disability sector. Through a set of circumstances, families and all the good things that life throws at you, I found myself 7 years ago joining the Irish Wheelchair Association, and I suppose it was an opportunity for me to combine maybe some of the experience I had at a governance level along with a personal interest and a personal passion and commitment to making Ireland a better place to live, in this case for people with disability, but I know for all of you in all sorts of different ways. We share that passion and that commitment to make this a better place to be. And so I came, as I said to somebody recently, when I spoke to one of my senior staff, they smiled at me and said, "You know, when you arrived, we absolutely hated you." I was supposed to take that as a compliment, actually. And he quickly turned and said, "But by God, now we're very glad you came." Because I suppose some of that boring stuff that I had cut my teeth on about policies, procedures, systems, records, minutes, signed, authority levels, signatures of senior people and so on, suddenly came to be something that was valuable in a way that perhaps as an organisation, like many organisations with such a long history, hadn't realised was quite so important. What I would say about our organisation is that it's a very large and a very complex organisation. But essentially it's an organisation that's engaged in working with people. And I regularly say our business is the people business. And once people are involved, it gets complicated. That said, it is an organisation that remains in the ownership of people with disability. And so 20,000 people who are affected by disability, either directly themselves or in their family, continue to own this organisation, which grew from a very small scale in 1960 with just 8 members to a point now where we have 20,000 members nationwide. To accept the role of CEO in such an organisation was genuinely, and I will say it here today again, a huge privilege for me, because I was given an opportunity to become involved in an organisation that was making a difference at local level right across Ireland. And it had the advantage that it was being steered by the people who were affected by what it did. So despite the growth in our size, the organisation remains faithful to the ethos and the values that it had when it was first established in 1960. And with the privilege that I had to join it also came certain responsibilities. The organisation is funded through a range of mechanisms. It's essentially a partnership with government to the extent of 77% of our income. The rest of our income we manage to attract by leveraging our position with others, our own income through small, modest enterprises, and our fundraising. And so it is the sum of the parts that allows us to retain the services that we deliver nationally. Our mission is to make a difference, and it has continued to be that. We have managed to maintain services where services would have disappeared. And we have continued to be innovators in the space that we work in, and it's a space that we share with many of you here. Very often, and Dr. Martin referred to it earlier, there can be an understanding that, you know, we are only big businesses now anymore, and that we've lost our interest and our focus on our charitable activities. What I would say is that in terms of size and scale, yes, we are a very large organisation. So therefore we must have in place all of the rigorous systems, procedures and standards that are required to run a large business. In other words, we must be business-like in everything that we do. But it doesn't mean that we necessarily lose our ambition to continue to deliver on the mission and values of the organisation and to deliver on the ambitions of our members. So while I may be in a different space from some of the organisations here, what I would be saying very strongly is that collectively we share so much that it is irrelevant almost that our scale is different. What we share is more important than what's different. The year 2012-2013 was such a shock, I think, for all of us. The events in the sector shattered public confidence, shattered donor confidence, and in many ways shattered our own confidence in what we were doing. The result of that was that it actually threatened our capacity to continue what we're doing. This sector is an essential piece of the jigsaw that is the fabric of Irish society. And anything that threatens our capacity to continue what we're doing is something that every person in this room needs to think about very carefully. Particularly, we all as individuals need to think about our personal responsibility in that space. Why did it happen? There's many and varied reasons. It's essentially a failure in corporate governance. You could excuse some of it perhaps, and Donal, you spoke about this. We tend to be defensive sometimes in our responses to situations like this. Perhaps we were overly focused on delivering the services. Perhaps we were overly focused on trying to raise more money. Perhaps we weren't paying enough attention to the developments that were happening around us. Perhaps boards didn't understand their roles properly, or didn't have the right people around the table, just as Donal said. Perhaps we were taking our donors for granted and thinking that it didn't impact on us, that it was nothing to do with us. Some thoughts that I think are worth reflecting on. If it did do anything that was useful and good for all of us, it forced us into a situation where we simply have to reassess our performance and critically examine how we're placed to respond to legitimate questions from those people who support us. It's not enough anymore to focus entirely on our charitable mission and vision. We must add into that charitable mission and vision the whole values piece, the whole ethical piece, and we should be writing that straight in there in the vision and, as I say, the mission for the organisation. Governance, how we run our business and the standards we apply is not just about ticking boxes. It's about doing business in a particular way, and it's about building that ambition to strive for the highest standards we can possibly achieve in everything we do. Build that right in at the very start of your strategy as an organisation. As I said a little earlier, this is not an issue just for a few. This is an issue for all of us, for big organisations and for small organisations. We collectively share an ambition to do a certain amount of good work. So equally, we must collectively work to restore confidence. I'm delighted that the government has appointed a charity regulator. I'm delighted that she's going to be here to speak to us today. But I'm also very clear that it is unreasonable of us to expect that the appointment of a charity regulator is in some way going to sort out the issue of confidence in this sector. because you know what? It simply won't. The only people who can put confidence back into the minds of the public, into the minds of the donors, and the minds of the people we work with is us. We must support the charity regulator in all that she does, and I am happy to be one of the organisations who's committed to that. But it is not enough to rely on her and her office to defend our reputation. The only people who can give confidence, as I said again, is us. What's our personal responsibility as individuals in this? As I say, around this room, I have many committed board members, CEOs of organisations, chairmen of organisations. So what have you personally got to do to play your part in making sure this happens? The tools and the support are there for us. We do have the governance code. We do have the fundraising principles. We have people like Sheila and ICTR. We have guidelines and regulations available to us freely. You cannot sit back as an individual anymore and not insist that these standards are applied in your organisation. As I say, I happen to be CEO of a very large organisation, so in terms of reporting, I have so many reporting lines that we tend to be relatively organised about how we present information. I mean, obviously we have significant government contracts we report on. We have, as I say, revenue. We have everything that everybody else has, health and safety and so on and so forth. And most importantly, in my case, I have 20,000 members who I send a personal invitation to every year and invite to come and ask me questions at our AGM. And I would remind those organisations that do have members to never forget that that is your best test bed for how you're doing your business, because you need to answer to the people who are members of your organisations regularly, and you need to take on, as I say, the personal responsibility. If you're a board member and you are not happy how your organisation is operating, if you're a board member and you're not happy with your CEO, if you're a chairman and you're not happy with the financial accounts, will you please speak up? Because it is not enough to sit there and think that other people will do it. We all individually must insist on highest standards. And I say that, as I say, not to suggest that I want to create difficulty at individual organisation level, but because I believe it is a personal responsibility to ask questions sometime. Now, those of you who know me won't be surprised that I've spoken as plainly as that about it, because that is my experience, that plain speaking and straight talking and hard questions is what actually makes change happen in organisations where good governance is perhaps not quite where it should be. Like Donal, I would say it is a journey. It is not a switch that you can turn on overnight. It is something that takes hard labour, day in, day out. Every board meeting, every AGM, you've got to keep at it. And when you think you've got the last problem sorted out, I bet you something, there's going to be another one round the corner. Keep an eye on your memorandum and articles. Keep people informed. And look after this piece of your business, because nothing matters more than this right now. If you don't take this on at an individual level and collectively within your organisations, not alone will you damage your own reputation and potentially threaten the work of your organisation, you also will potentially damage the reputation of all of us in the sector. To do that will be to have failed collectively to have got our message across. And I suppose ultimately the people who lose out in that situation are the people who depend on us to do what we do in whatever aspect of Irish life we're working. It's about leadership, and leadership is not necessarily solely the prerogative of the CEO, of the chairman. Leadership is about every single person in the organisation believing in this organisation wanting to do its business properly. To move on is really what I would like to see us be able to do. To move on from a situation where, as Donal said, organisations are defending their position, trying to explain, trying to reassure constantly. This should be a given. Anybody who looks for information about my salary, what we do with the money, what we do in wherever, should be able to access that information very, very easily. That's not unreasonable of them. That is absolutely legitimate and reasonable to have that expectation of us. And so on this one, I tend to be a zero tolerance person and say, if you're not willing to answer those questions, then you need to go and start talking. You need to start talking among yourselves as a board, as an organisation, because if you ain't willing to do that, you really should be questioning what you're doing. As I said, I would love to see us get through this piece stronger with the support of the charity regulator, with the support of the governance code and the other tools that are there for us, to move the debate on to the real meat of this matter, which is about what we do and what we contribute. I read a very interesting article during the year about the concept of social profit, and again this ties in with some of what has been said earlier. We describe ourselves, and our organisation in particular, as a not-for-profit organisation, but in fact we are there for profit. It's not for financial profit, it's for a social profit. It's to make a difference. We have resources way beyond the financial resources we are able to attract. We have the resources, in our case, of 2,000 registered volunteers who are working literally day and night around the country. And so please let us work together to ensure that what has happened doesn't set us back, doesn't stop us doing the work of innovating, of listening, of being creative, of finding solutions. Because as said earlier, organisations like us are close to the front line. In our case, we're in people's homes every day of the week. So we know the reality of living with a disability in Ireland. We know the reality of not being able to find work, of not having enough money to pay the ESB bill, and so on and so forth. The richness of that information has to be translated into real activity. And we're better placed than anybody else, as I say, collectively, to do that. So we must continue that work of identifying the issues, developing responses, being innovators, and being advocates for those who need our support. The future for all of us is not in the hands of any one of us. The future for all of us is in the hands of all of us. I want us to be proud, because I'm very proud of what is happening in the charity sector in a whole range of organisations. You might have detected I continue to be passionate about what we do, because it's that kind of passion that drives us to keep demanding more of ourselves. I want us to continue to be a force for good. And if you have not started on the journey to get governance in order in your organisation, please, please get started. If I can personally be of help to any organisation, I'm willing to do that. And I know in particular that the charity regulator and ICTR are equally willing to do that. We simply have to work together. We have to keep going, and we have to keep getting better and better and better at this space. Thank you.